Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Kaiser, and I made a presentation on sensory processing disorder, what it is, and the strategies that we can use to help. I am making this presentation for my Foundations of Autism class. So we're just going to jump right into it. What is sensory processing? Sensory processing is how we move through sensory events that happen in our lives every day. Well, what is a sensory event? Examples of sensory events are what we smell throughout the day, when you smell food cooking in the kitchen, for example, the taste that we experience while eating, the lights that we experience throughout the day, for example, lamps, ceiling lights. Those are two really big examples because I know the lamps that are in my house provide a much different light than the overhead lights in my classroom, which are much more harsh. Other examples would be car lights, TV, iPad, etc. The things that we touch and the things that are touching us. Examples of that would be the clothes that we wear, being hugged by a friend, washing our hands, etc. The noises that we hear. I, for example, live on a busy road and I can hear the noises going by of the cars going by pretty much all the time. But that's something that my brain, for the most part, is able to filter out. How we use our body, knowing when our muscles are flexed or when they're not. Everyone has a threshold for processing sensory events. Hold on, I'm gonna close my cat out so you don't have to hear her meowing the whole time. Everybody has a threshold for processing sensory events, but everybody's threshold for processing is different. Some examples of common sensory events people may be adverse to are nails on a chalkboard. That sound, not a fan favorite to most of the people that I know. Wet socks. I also don't know a lot of people who enjoy the feeling of wet socks. If you step in a puddle, smelling rotten fruit or rotten vegetables or pretty much any rotten food. Is a sensory event that most people do not enjoy and are adverse to. And now I'm going to go over the 8 senses in our sensory system because we're going to talk a lot about these 8 different sensory systems and how they play into sensory processing and sensory processing disorder. So olfactory is our sense of smell received through the nose. So like I was saying, cook food in the kitchen, air fresheners in the house. Tactile is sense of touch received through contact through the skin. Again, that example of like giving hugs or the clothing that we wear, being tapped on the shoulder. Oh my gosh, I can't speak right now. Proprioception. I am not saying that correctly right now. I apologize. Is awareness of body and space and the strength needed to complete actions. So like I said, using your muscles and being aware of how to use them, and just being aware of where your body is in space. Gustory is a sense of taste info. Interoception is awareness of internal body states. So an example of this would be like when you know you need to go to the bathroom. You're aware of an internal state of your body. Vestibular is a sense of balance and spatial orientation. Auditory is a sense of sound info received through the ears. Visual is a sense of sight info received through the eyes. So what we're seeing. Some individuals with sensory processing disorder may have a threshold for sensitivity that events that is low or otherwise have sensory sensitivity. So to backtrack just a little bit here, we talked about what sensory processing was. what a sensory event is. And now if you have sensory processing disorder, this is known as individuals who have who experience sensory processing events, but their threshold, which we've talked about, is either low or high. So individuals with sensory processing disorder either have sensitivity to sensory processing or to sensory events, or a really high threshold to sensory events, and are sensory seekers. So this is getting us into what sensory sensitivity might look like. Examples of sensory sensitivity would be not wanting to be hugged, being very selective about the textures, about textures, and therefore having a limited amount of food that those individuals are willing to eat. Everyday sounds can feel very overwhelming to an individual with sensory processing disorder if their sensory sensitivity, if they have high sensory sensitivity. So I have a video to share that kind of just gives a good example about what sensory sensitivity would look like if you had that sensory sensitivity to audio. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives some understanding to what sensory sensitivity might feel and look like for an individual who has that. Now that we've talked about sensory sensitivity with sensory processing disorder, I want to talk about the opposite end of that. Because some individuals with sensory processing disorder may have thresholds that are very high. When the threshold is high, this means that an individual will likely require more sensitivity input before they respond and are more likely to be sensory seeking. Examples of this would be failing to notice stimuli that others notice quickly. Examples of this could be somebody calling your name and seeming as though, or calling somebody's name and they seem as though they're not hearing you. Being touched, they might not process that you're tapping them on the shoulder. Having a wet diaper, a kiddo that has a really high threshold might not notice that they have a completely wet diaper, or wet underwear. Fidgeting in their seat is something that could be common. Use of big body moves more than their peers, so really active, super active kids. Grabbing onto others frequently. Consistently seeking to touch items around them. Seeking to make noises often. And then I have another quick video that just kind of really helps get a good sense of what having a high threshold for sensory events might look like, or give examples of what a sensory seeking individual might look like.
Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Ash the OT, and I provide parents and caregivers tools and strategies in order to help the little ones in their lives to learn, grow, and make progress. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 6 different ways that you can identify whether you have a child that is a sensory seeker. One of the most common signs that you have a child that is a sensory seeker is if the child is one that is always on the go. So this is the child that
My internet's gonna be slow now.
is constantly moving, constantly fidgeting. It's
Oh, come on. My other video works so well.
so hard for them to like sit still and attend to an activity, or they may attend to an activity for a very short time and then move to something else and then move to something else. This same child may also love some intense types of movement. So they may love jumping, but really forceful jumping. They may love swinging. They may love spinning. They may love inversion or being upside down. Another way that you can tell that your child is a sensory seeker is if your child really
Oh my goodness. There we go.
loves and craves loud noises or sounds, or they're the ones who love to have the volume turned all the way up on the TV or the iPad. They love things that are really loud volume. They may even produce their own sounds just to kind of keep it going. So they may sing really loudly, talk really loudly. They may be the child that you always have to tell them to, can you lower your voice or use your inside voice? This may also be the child that loves to hum constantly or making all kinds of noises and sounds with their mouths and their lips and their tongue. So these are children who are seeking more of that auditory or that sound input. The third sign that you have a child that is a sensory seeker is if they love that visual intensity. So they love things that spin, such as the wheels on their toy cars. They love to watch fans spinning. They love things that are fast-paced and moving all the time. They love really bright lights and flashy lights. They really love the stimulation that they get from watching things move really quickly, such as things on a screen or things on a tablet. They love shiny things that sparkle. So this is another sign that your child seeks that visual input and that visual stimuli. The fourth sign that you have a child that is a sensory seeker is that they love to roughhouse. They love intense physical movement. So they love bumping into things or bumping into people. They love crashing. They may love to jump off of things, which may give you a heart attack, but they love standing on top of things and jumping off of things because they really get a lot of intensity and impact when they hit the ground. They may also be the ones that fall down on purpose. They may love to give hugs or interact with other individuals, but sometimes it comes across as being really rough or way too aggressive. They may also use a lot of force and a lot of pressure when playing with their toys or with objects in their home. The fifth way to tell if you have a child who is a sensory seeker is if they love to eat things that have very, very strong taste, or things that are like spicy, or things that are sour, they really love that intensity that they get when they eat certain things like that. So after watching this video, you may be thinking to yourself, yep, that sounds like my child. Hey everybody, welcome to my channel.
Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives a clear picture about what sensory seeking might look like. I chose that video because it really aligned with all the research that I was doing, and she is an occupational therapist. I put the link to all of my videos at the end of the presentation, but occupational therapists are fantastic when it comes to sensory processing disorder. I use my occupational therapist for my kiddos at my school all the time. So if you have access to one, I highly suggest partnering with an occupational therapist if you have the ability to do so. So I also wanted to point out that sensory processing is complex. So now that we've talked about sensory sensitivity and sensory seekers, sensory processing is a little bit more complex in being one way or the other. So an individual may have different thresholds in different sensory areas. So an example of this would be potentially an individual who has a really low threshold or sensitivity for visual processing, but a high threshold for auditory or sound. So I just don't want anybody to make the assumption that they are working with an individual who has sensory processing disorder, and in every area they're either going to be sensory sensitive or sensory seeking. It can be a combination of both, and they might not have high or low in a particular area. Just because they have sensory processing disorder doesn't mean that every single area is going to be an area that they have high or low thresholds for. So something to keep in mind. Now I want to talk about sensory processing and autism spectrum disorder. So in my research, I have found that up to 90% of individuals with autism spectrum disorder have sensory processing disorder as well. However, an individual with ASD does not automatically have sensory processing disorder, and having sensory processing disorder does not mean that the individual also has autism spectrum disorder. So I really wanted to point that out to everybody. And now that we have gone over what is sensory processing, what are sensory events, what is sensory sensitivity, what is being a sensory seeker, now that we can kind of recognize those things, I wanted to briefly go over some strategies to help. But before we get into strategies, I want to point out to everybody that every individual is different and will require different interventions. And again, if you have an occupational therapist that you can partner with, I would highly suggest that. So first, I'm going to go into possible strategies if you are working with a sensory seeker. Offer different texture foods such as crunchy, smooth, chewy, hard, soft. Put different colored backing on worksheets so that the color of the worksheet is not the same as the color of the surface being worked on. This has come up in my research, but this has also been something that was pointed out to me by my occupational therapist that I didn't even think about before, where if you have a kiddo who is sensory seeking in visual, and they have a white piece of paper and are working on a white table, they're not going to easily pick up the words or the worksheet that's on the table. So put a different colored paper worksheet for that table, and it will potentially help. Provide wiggle seats. Some have different textures on them. I know for my classroom, I have a few little wiggle seats that are just little round kind of plastic discs, but you pump them up. So they have a little bit of squish to them still, and they can wiggle around. There's different, one side's bumpy and one side is more smooth. So they can feel that with their hands and kind of get some more of that stimulation. And these are easily able to be moved around the classroom. I've had kids sit with them at meal times, at work tables, at circle, anything that they need. And like I said, you can get them on Amazon. Super easy, super cool resource to have in the classroom. Add different textures to work surfaces. So examples would be to put small pieces of Velcro or bubble wrap on the desk for them to be able to feel while they're working. You could also allow students to use headphones to listen to music if they are auditory seeking. Play I Spy as you go throughout your day. Create different movement activities for both inside and outside that the student can use when needed. I know I have a student who is very sensory seeking and seeks big movements and grabbing onto people. And we have obstacle courses as an option outside when we go outside to play, but inside I also have appropriate inside activities for him to choose from. I have a big body movement box that is filled with different appropriate activities that he can use inside, that has like exercise flashcards, little dots that he can place around and hop to them. So that's been really useful. Create smelly bottles with empty spice bottles and cotton balls dipped in different essential oils. I know Winco, if you have a Winco nearby, they sell for like 50 cents already empty spice containers that are like little plastic ones. Allow the student to take their shoes off inside to get grounded and find themselves in space. I know we've talked a little bit about how some individuals with sensory processing have a harder time figuring out where their body is in space. So allowing that person to take their shoes off and feel the ground, or even lay completely on the ground, can be really helpful. So I have another short video that kind of shows what this might look like in action.
Sensory play at home. Playing sensory games in the home is fun and easy. This video will show you how to engage your child in play that provides several types of proprioceptive input. The proprioceptive system is a sense of the body's muscles and joints. This type of sensory input helps control our movement and posture. Having this system allows us to know where our body is and then be able to move our body with little to no effort. Animal walks help strengthen all muscles, especially hand and arm muscles, and help increase a child's balance and coordination. Examples include stomping dinosaur, frog jumps, crab walks, snake crawl, bear walk. These are just some examples of animal walks. Other walks to try are elephant walks, mermaid walks, and inchworms. Encourage creativity. Your child's imagination is a great tool. Crab soccer is a game that strengthens the muscles and increases the child's body awareness. Crab soccer is played in the crab walk position, walking on arms and legs. Using your feet, kick the ball around. Set up goals for a target. For this video, we used a playground ball, but any ball or balloon can be used. Wheelbarrow race. This is how to hold your child in the wheelbarrow position. Have the child go on their hands and feet. Then you hold the child by the ankles and lift their legs. A wheelbarrow race can help strengthen a child's muscles like the shoulders, arms, and hand muscles, and can increase body awareness. Rolling and crashing. Using soft items like pillows and couch cushions, you can build a tower for your child to roll and crash into. This is not only a fun game, but also provides your child with proprioceptive and vestibular input. Deep pressure games. Couch cushion sandwich. To make a sandwich using couch cushions or big pillows, lay one cushion on the floor and have the child lay flat on their stomach with their heads outside the pillows. Then using a second cushion, give the child one big squish. This activity provides the child with deep pressure. Deep pressure is a type of sensory input that can calm a child. This can help decrease the child's energy in order to complete low-energy activities such as homework or sitting down for a meal. Blanket burrito. The blanket burrito is another activity for deep pressure. Fold a long blanket in half and have the child lay down on their back with their arms crossed over their chest. Roll the child in the blanket, making sure the blanket isn't too loose or too tight, as this can harm the child. For added sensory input and muscle work, have the child try to crawl out of the blanket as you hold tight to the bottom of the blanket where the child's feet are. Sensory play at home.
Okay. So now that we've talked about sensory seekers, I'm going to share some strategies to possibly help individuals with sensory sensitivity or that are sensory avoiding. Have work or play areas available that are away from other students or stimulus. Examples would be quiet areas or cozy corners. I know I have a quiet area in my classroom that is a space that is completely away from the majority of the activities that happen in the classroom. There's cushions in there, some fidget toys, some breathing prompts, and it's just a space for them to go and be on their own. I only allow 1 to 2 students in there at a time, so it doesn't get overcrowded too. Remove any air fresheners. I'm not an air freshener fan, so I'm totally on board with this. Close window shades to reduce distractions from anything going on outside. Headphones that reduce background noise. I know that I also, from Amazon, have gotten headphones that don't completely block out sound, so the student can wear them and they can still hear you talking, but it really blocks out the majority of all that background noise, which is really cool. Style hair to avoid hair touching the skin if skin touching is their sensitivity. Braiding or putting in a ponytail, short hairstyles. Use visual cues rather than touch to get attention. So it could be a little piece of paper that gets their attention rather than touching their shoulder. Allow the individual to have 1 food at a time on their plate. Select food with even textures or allowing food to be room temperature when possible. I know that's not always possible because of safety reasons, but if it is, that could potentially help, depending on the individual. Give frequent breaks to allow time away from overstimulating areas. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you guys was, we're not going to watch this whole video, just the first little chunk of it, because this is something that I use in my classroom and has been suggested to me before, and I think is really good for sensory seekers and sensory avoiders, and we'll talk about that after we watch. So follow along if you'd like.
Melting, melting, melting. We all have those moments when we freeze. We can't move. We can't think. But with practice, we can get good at melting that frozen feeling. Let's freeze up and then melt. Stand up in a spot with a little space around you. Cross your arms and hold your shoulders with your hands. Carefully tuck your chin down and in. Tighten as many muscles in your body as you can. Let your body be frozen, like an ice statue. Feet tight, legs tense, belly tight, shoulders up. Now, even make a frozen face. Close your eyes, your mouth, your jaw, tight. Feeling frozen? Really still? Now, little by little, begin to melt. Let your chin stay low as your face softens and melts. Your jaw opens slightly. Your eyes blink open, just a little. Your mouth and cheeks melt and feel soft. You're melting. Let your shoulders melt and go down. Hands let go. Arms glide down to your sides, melting. Let your legs melt too. Soften and bend. Melt. Try to melt all the way to the floor. Down, down, down. Let yourself be a blob, a puddle on the floor. Melted all the way to soft. Exhale long. Once frozen and tight, And now, melted, a little more at ease. Let's do it again.
Okay. So the reason why I love that video is because you can adapt it in a lot of different ways to meet the needs of your individual or individuals. I use it in my classroom. What I typically do is have everybody spread out. I turn off the lights so that it's not completely dark, but all of the lights are turned off. And the only light available is maybe on the other side of the classroom with a window cracked open a little bit. I allow them to choose to take their shoes off or keep their shoes on if they need that grounding. I also give them the option to lay down or stand up doing this and close their eyes. You can show them the video if that's more useful, or you can just play it in the background and they can follow along, which is what I typically do. But it allows students to get grounded, to be aware of their inner body and their muscles. It gives them a sensory break if visual is something that they have sensory sensitivity to, because you're turning off the lights. It also really quiets down the classroom a lot because they're not talking to each other. I tell my students they either need to be participating in melting or they need to be reading a book or doing something quietly, maybe hanging out in the quiet area for a little while. If the auditory is still something that they're struggling with because of the noise of the video, you can put those headphones on them. So it helps my class as a whole. And I think you can adapt it to how you need. Go Noodle is a great resource. They have a lot of videos. I use this video for my 3-year-olds all the way up to my 6th graders. And I'm sure you could use it for older students too. That's just the population that I work the most with. Super cool resource. Highly suggest checking it out. But in conclusion, sensory processing disorder is extremely complex. Everybody's needs will be different. I encourage you to partner again with your occupational therapist if possible and continue to do research related to your own individual needs. So we kind of just baseline touched on a lot of different things. Hopefully, if you're noticing something that resonates with you and your experiences or the experiences that you are seeing with individuals you're working with, you can dive more into that or connect with your occupational therapist potentially to get more information. Here are the references. I'll hold up for a few seconds so that you guys can take a picture if you need. And then here's the second page. And that's all I have. I hope that this was useful for you guys and that you learned something new. Thank you so much.